Good morning or good afternoon, students. Mrs. Loy here with my Blu-ray blocking glasses on to bring you your writing workshop lesson for today. Today we're going to really focus on creating an argument analysis practice paragraph. And so I'm going to head back over to our module page so that I can unpack the big important step number 1 today. So here we are taking a look at step 1 of today's e-learning writing workshop lesson, and this is all about studying the example. So here in just a moment, I'm going to cut over to our PowerPoint slides, and we're going to take a look at an example paragraph of an argument analysis that I wrote earlier this year and that you guys actually saw during your Flex Day on March 13th. But we're going to revisit so that we can take a look at the specific components that show up in this paragraph so that we can write our own practice paragraph later on in this writing workshop lesson. So as we're looking over this example, our key is to identify the 4 components that go into an argumentative analysis and then to write these elements in our writer's reader's notebook along with a brief description. So let's cut over to our example and start our work today. So for the sake of this writing workshop today and this practice analysis, we're going to focus on the prompt, how does Cassius use rhetoric to persuade Brutus? So we've already seen Cassius using rhetorical devices in Act 1, and so that's what we're going to start to look at as we have an example. And then as you guys move on into this writing workshop lesson, you're going to be talking about Decius and how Decius uses argumentative rhetorical appeals in Act 2, Scene 2, which is the required reading for this week. So let me go to my next slide here. And I'm going to make my screen a little bit bigger so that we can see everything. Alrighty, so again, our prompt, how does Cassius use rhetoric to persuade Brutus? So let's take a look at this example. And as I'm reading, I want you guys to think about what are the elements that Mrs. Loy includes in her paragraph that I would need to include in my argumentative analysis that would help me be successful and would convey to my reader what I'm trying to accomplish, and that is to persuade them about which character best uses these devices. So see if you can pick up on those cues as I work through this paragraph. Cassius uses ethos, logos, and pathos to begin to persuade Brutus to turn against Caesar. This is demonstrated when Cassius references the noble Romans to bring credibility or ethos to his argument as he states, I've heard many of the noblest Romans, speaking of you, complaining of the tyranny of today's government and wishing that your eyes were working better. When Cassius appeals to credible Romans, he is using ethos and trying to gain Brutus' trust. This seems effective as Brutus responds with a series of questions as to why he endeavors Cassius would lead him to join. So taking a look at this paragraph, what you might notice is that the first sentence is very general. I'm giving you guys an idea of what I'm going to talk about in my paragraph. Now, we might confuse this with our claim statement, but we're not quite there yet because we're being very general. So this is a claim statement, but we're going to get a little bit more specific here in a little bit. So in the second sentence, what you probably notice is that I bring up my character and then I start to narrow my focus. This is what we would call our topic sentence or our main idea sentence. So in my claim, I tell you that I'm going to talk about Cassius, I'm going to mention rhetorical appeals, and I talk about all 3. And then I'm going to talk to you about what he uses these appeals for. In my topic sentence, I start to get a little bit more specific. So which device does this particular paragraph focus on? And in this case, my topic sentence reveals that I'm talking about credibility or ethos. The next thing you're going to notice is probably that I've used this quoted evidence and I've used an in-text citation. And you might be wondering why I'm not using Shakespeare's name here, because I'm not quoting the Shakespearean text. I'm actually using the modern translation of the text. So I want to give credit to John Crowther because he's the one who does the modern translation. I then include the act, the scene number, and the lines from the original text that would include the quoted pieces of evidence that I've used. Next, I talk about how the appeal is being used. And then lastly, I talk about how I know it's effective. Rhetorical appeals cannot be successful if you don't discuss the effectiveness of the appeal on the character that we're trying to persuade. So if we look at our next slide here, this is going to unpack the requirements for your practice analysis. So when you guys are working through your argument analysis practice, you should include a claim statement, which is very general. So if you go back and look at my example, we can highlight that. The main idea or topic sentence, the evidence, which is quoted from the text and gives an in-text citation, which includes your author's last name, and then the act number, the scene number, and then the lines from the original text. And then lastly, your reasoning, which is the explanation of how the evidence supports the claim. So that's where we tell how it's being used and then how we know it's effective. So let's go back to our paragraph here and we'll highlight all of those elements. This first one is my claim statement. So I'm going to make that pink. The second one is my topic sentence. And so I'm going to make that orange. Then I have my quoted evidence from the text with my appropriate in-text citation. And then lastly, I end with my explanation or my reasoning, and that is blue. So I hope that this video was helpful in unpacking the 4 required elements. So make sure that you're jotting these elements down in your notebook and that you have a brief description of what they are. And now it's time for you to do your practice. So head on to the next step of this module, do your practice, and make sure that you don't skip over the share today because there is a share point where you're going to be typing in your topic sentence or your main idea. So good luck and message me with any questions that you might have. Have a good day.